Wish was actually the perfect Disney 100 movie. Don't believe me? There you are! My name is Amy, and welcome to Deduce, Reuse, and Recycle, where today we will be looking at Disney's Wish and figuring out what the heck is going on with it. One of the biggest complaints circulating about the film, apart from the animation style, Asha's character, the music, basically everything, is that it doesn't fit the mold of a typical Disney fairy tale. I could list several Disney movies from the last 5 years that fit that mold way worse than Wish, but for the sake of argument, we're just not even going to touch those. Anyway, your complaint: Wish isn't a Disney fairy tale. My rebuttal: Wish is the Disney fairy tale. You see, even though Wish didn't necessarily have a key takeaway, that all starts making sense when you realize that instead of telling a story with a typical moral, they were telling a story about the current state of the Disney company, specifically the film side. After a century of telling everyone else's stories, they finally told their own. Think about it this way. The Walt Disney Company just turned 100 years old, and for many of those years, it was evident that their main goal was to inspire children of all ages, especially the next generation. And it worked. The golden age of Disney has classics that I don't think will ever be forgotten. But the Disney Renaissance really had that impact that Disney was trying to go for. Do you know how many middle-aged adults I hear reminisce about The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast practically on the daily? Compared to that, I don't think I've heard a single child talk about Strange World or Raya and the Last Dragon. Anyway, going back to Wish, there is a character who, similarly to the Walt Disney Company, turns 100 years old in the first scene of the film, whose wish is simply to inspire the next generation. Sabino. This alone isn't enough to go off of, but I promise there's more. So for now, let's just stick with two connections. One, Sabino is our stand-in for the original Walt Disney Company, and two, the wishes are every story Disney could possibly tell. There's not much to elaborate on that second part, but it makes everything click. So if that's what we're working with, I say we tackle the villain next and just jump straight to the point. Magnifico is our in-movie stand-in for Bob Chapek, or the modern Disney Company. In the movie, Magnifico says that he only grants the wishes that he knows will be good for Rosas, but later we learn that he only grants the wishes that will benefit his reign. In translation, that means that the Disney Company has only been telling stories that they think will be beneficial for their company. This is especially obvious when you look at the movies released between 2020 and 2022, or Chapek's time as the CEO of Disney, from releases from Pixar, Marvel, literally any of Disney's properties apart from Disney Nature. Disney Nature can do no wrong. I think we can all agree that a lot of the movies made during this period just absolutely sucked. It's normal for a studio to release a bad film every now and again, but this was just a never-ending cycle of garbage underneath the Disney umbrella. And hey, some of the movies were passable, but to say that you like them is like saying that you'd settle for Tom down the street when you're actually in love with Josh Hutcherson. Now, just as the wishes Magnifico grants are what's safe for Rosas, the movies Disney has been releasing have been what's safe for the company. A lot of people believe that these movies were trying to be too woke or politically correct in an attempt for the company to stay afloat in the film critic communities, inevitably sacrificing creative and artistic integrity of the projects in the end. On a different note, Magnifico in the movie decides what everyone deserves and what wishes get to be granted. Does any of that ring a bell? No? Well, remember how we said that the wishes were our stand-in for every story Disney could tell? Disney is deciding what stories get told, what wishes get granted, and they own so many properties that if they don't approve of a story, no one gets to tell it. That's why studios like Illumination are growing at a fairly good rate right now. It's because they aren't owned by Disney and they don't have to play it safe. They can tell the stories that they actually want to tell and experience the success that comes with keeping that artistic integrity. Even a project like the Super Mario Bros. Movie from earlier this year was a risk for them. Chris Pratt's voice acting will do that for you. But the passion for the project wasn't lost, and they weren't just making a film in an attempt to get a good Rotten Tomatoes score. They had a story they wanted to tell, so they went out and told it. So if Magnifico is Bob Chapek, that makes Queen Amaya Bob Iger. Everyone wanted to believe that Bob Chapek was going to be a good CEO for Disney, especially Bob Iger, who was his predecessor. Just as everyone in Rosas wanted to believe that Magnifico was a good king, especially his wife Queen Amaya. We even hear her lament about how she wishes that her belief in him had been validated after she joins Asha and her team of rebels. What's important to note about this entire situation is that Bob Chapek probably wouldn't have gone fired, or just maybe not as quickly, if he hadn't made some pretty bad decisions. He raised prices on virtually everything, made policies and offered services that no one asked for and no one wanted to use, and showed more interest in growing the profits for the Disney company rather than maintaining the honor and integrity of the company itself. Some of you may disagree with me and believe that he actually did a pretty good job, but that's literally why he got fired. Like I said, he probably wouldn't have gotten fired if he hadn't gone as far as he had, very similarly to how Magnifico probably would have gotten away with it if he hadn't taken out all of his evilness on the entire kingdom rather than just Asha in his attempts to get Star. In the end, both Chapek and Magnifico got kicked out. Who replaced them? Bob Iger and Queen Amaya. Now that we know who and what Sabino, the Wishes, Magnifico, and Amaya represent, let's just take a break from that kind of stuff and figure out where this story is even taking place. Throughout Rosas, there are several references to some of the greatest stories and characters Disney has ever made. Characters like Little John from Robin Hood and Bambi from Bambi end up interacting after the You're a Star sequence, and that random townsgirl ends up meeting Peter Pan at the very end. Even Asha ends up becoming the fairy godmother. Some people I know think that this means that Rosas is meant to be representative of Disney Plus, which in all fairness, it might be. But I believe that Rosas is actually meant to represent Disneyland. Now, not only are fairy tale characters from a plethora of stories able to somehow coexist in both of these locations, but it is made explicitly known in Wish that anyone can visit or move to Rosas and be treated as if they perfectly belong there. Now, what did Walt Disney say at the opening of Disneyland in 1955?
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
Sound familiar? Also, Rosas was low-key treated more like a tourist destination that just gaslit people into moving there, kind of like how nobody I know would ever willingly go to Anaheim and Orlando if the theme parks were not there. With that out of the way, there are only two more characters to analyze, the first one being Asha. Our dorky little sorcerer's apprentice wannabe saves her kingdom, saving her Saba Sabino in the process, and even sings about how she'll do anything to protect the Wishes in the song At All Costs, which I actually really enjoyed. Who else do we know who shares these qualities? Freaking Mickey Mouse. Hear me out! For starters, he is literally the sorcerer's apprentice. But not only that, he saved Disney at the beginning of his career and later saved the company again in 2013 when he got redesigned to be what he was always supposed to be, which is a cartoon character, rather than what the company had made him out to be for years, which was just another marketing label that nobody cared about. Mickey saved Disney. Asha saved Sabino. Mickey Mouse is also committed to protecting the happy endings of everyone's stories, as we see in the stage show Fantasmic. I love that show! Exactly how Asha is committed to protecting the Wishes. Heck, even at the end, it's proposed that Asha become a fairy godmother, not the queen or even a princess of Rosas. Why? Because Mickey Mouse isn't the CEO of Disney. Sure, he may be one of the first things you think about when Disney's brought up, but he can't actually control what happens to the company. Only one character left. We're not looking at Valentino, Star, or any of the other characters that you'd probably expect me to bring up. No, our final character is Asha's father, who I believe is Walter Elias Disney himself. For starters, they're both dead, which does actually play into it. In the movie, even though Asha's father is dead, her Saba Sabino is still around and turning 100 years old. Kind of like how Walt Disney's dead, but his company is still very much around and just had their 100th anniversary. I thought that was a cute parallel, but what really blows my mind is that Asha and her father sitting on the tree is the movie's equivalent of the partner statue. Even down to their orientation of Asha being to the left of her father and Mickey being to the left of Walt, once you unsee it, you can't unsee it. Now in the movie, Asha and her father are looking up to the stars, one of which Asha ends up wishing on. Even though no one has ever confirmed what Walt is actually pointing at in the partner statue, who's to say that he and Mickey aren't looking at a certain wishing star too? Great, now we have our full list. Saba is the original Walt Disney Company, The Wishes are stories, Magnifico is Bob Chapek, Queen Amaya is Bob Iger, Rosas is Disneyland, Asha is Mickey Mouse, and her deceased father is Walt Disney. Why do I do this? So what does any of this mean? Well, let me reiterate what I said at the beginning. Wish is the story of the Walt Disney Company. The story of an incredible man who told stories that were adored by the masses for ages. A man who never got to see the heights of how much his company grew and the success his parks and characters experienced. A man whose company was run by someone who should never have taken that seat. A man who manipulated the stories and those who told them, eventually getting replaced with a different leader. And through it all, Disney's most beloved and prized character, watching and finally rising up to fix things. Honestly, I hope that this is Disney recognizing that they've been screwing up big time these last few years. I personally have been frustrated with their storytelling and just general policies for the last 3 to 5 years, but I know people who have been fed up for the last 20 since the end of the Disney Renaissance. With the writing and acting strikes over and new policies put in place against AI contributions to film, I think there is a good chance that Disney gets back on track like Wish alludes to, but only time will tell. So there you have it. That is why we were wrong about Disney's Wish. I know a lot of people are still on the hate train with this one, but I actually quite enjoyed it. It's definitely not my favorite Disney film, but unlike some of its other recent releases, I will be rewatching this one once it hits Disney+. Alright, that's all for now. Stay toasty.